Hey guys, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm excited to talk about stress and stress management today. And to be honest, stress is not something that has to be managed, it can actually be removed. I think there's a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings around stress. Not everyone goes into the depth of understanding where stress actually comes from at a more biological level. And so some of that is what we're going to get into today. Um, I my past decade plus career as a software developer was taught to learn. I was taught to solve problems at a root cause level and dig down to the best place to solve the problem. And a lot of stress management solutions out there today are not solving things at that root level, if that makes sense. And we're going to get into why that is and everything like that. So I just wanted to give that kind of opening and start this off just by saying this is going to be different than what you've heard, right? If you wanted me to come here and just talk about typical stress management tips, like you can look those up on Google, guys, right? So we're all smart. You're all very smart. You wouldn't be here otherwise. That's not what I wanted to do today. So what we're going to hear today is going to be very different. It's going to be kind of a high level overview, and then we're going to get into some of the lower level stuff and some practical tips that you can actually use to take with you if you want. And then, of course, we'll have some time for Q&A. Does that sound cool? All right, sweet. So the first thing, forget everything you know about stress management. Honestly, forget everything you know about stress management. This is going to be very different. Nobody taught you, most likely, what stress actually is. And I hinted a little bit on that before, and so we're going to get into it. But this is not time management, right? This is not mind management. This is not mindset. What we're going to be talking about today is something entirely different. This isn't like emotion management. What we're talking about today is like stress at the most root cause at a biological level. So we're going to get into that. The goal of, or at least my goal for you guys today in this talk, as part of this talk, is to take away the idea. There's two things. The first idea is addition by subtraction. What does that mean? As high achievers, as high performers, you're all very successful. We like to add things, right? We want to add to our numbers in the bank. We want to add to the business. We want to add to the number of employees. We want to add to the revenue. We want to add to our families, all of this stuff, right? We want to add time management. We want to add stress management skills. The reality is that you don't need to add more things. You don't need to add more managing. You don't need to add more tools. You don't need to add more apps. What we want to do is subtract the things that are in the way, subtract the things that are causing the mental churn, the anxiety we want to subtract the things that are causing the stress. I'm sorry about that, guys. My camera glitched. But we want to subtract the things that are causing the stress and the anxiety in the first place, right? We're not trying to add more skills. We're not trying to add more apps. We're not trying to add more motivation. We're not trying to add more drive. We're not trying to add more management of things. We're trying to remove stuff rather than add things. So it's a fundamentally different approach to most other stress management that's out there. And the other thing I want you guys to take away from this is that the whole goal of the work that I'm going to explain today is to raise the floor. It's to increase our capacity. It's to build resilience. Right? If you think of this graph of these ups and downs, right? If your peaks, if the height of your peak is the same height as your crash, then you're going to come up and then come down and then come up and then come down. And you're always going to stay within this range. But if we can make your crashes half the size even of your peaks, then you're going to come up and down a little bit, and then up more, and then down a little bit, and then up more and down a little bit. And over time, you're going to progress upwards because you have more resilience. You can turn around faster. Your floor is being raised rather than staying in between a floor and ceiling. So that is the long-term goal for why we do what we do in this, what I'm talking about, and why I'm so passionate about this. So I want to tell you guys a story. I was at a networking event. It was like a supercar meetup kind of networking event with steaks and cigars, and people came up in whatever car they wanted. And this guy that I was sitting next to for dinner was telling me how he had been selling Lamborghinis for 8 years. He was a salesman at Lamborghini. And after 8 years, he decided he had enough. And he decided he had enough because he kept on checking himself into the emergency room multiple times a week. And he told me this was because he thought he was dying. He thought, or he felt, the stress that he had from that job. And I didn't know they were this stressful, but imagine a commission check for selling a Lambo. Like, that's up there, right? It was so stressful, he ended up checking himself into the ER multiple times a week. And he eventually quit his job because he was like, I can't handle this. The symptoms he had, the feelings he had from the stress alone were practically literally killing him. So let me ask you this. How do you think he would have shown up differently if he didn't have the stress? Someone comes in, prospect, wanting to buy a Lamborghini, wanting to get some information. How many more sales do you think he would have closed if he didn't have the stress and had that feeling like he was dying? I mean, I didn't ask him. I don't have the numbers for that, but just think about if you are getting so distracted by stress and it's affecting your business and it makes you have to leave your job. Something's a problem here. So, tip number one that I want to get into for today is just don't let yourself get that far. Stress compounds over time. The earlier that you address it, the less it's going to actually cost you because it builds. It's like a bucket. We have a stress bucket and it gets filled over time. And if it overflows, you could be heart attack, heart disease, right? Something can happen that's going to severely affect your health. So, number one is don't let yourself get so far that you feel like you're dying and you have to check yourself into the emergency room. I don't think anyone here is at that state. But just tip number one, start being aware. Awareness is always the first step. Notice when you are running hot. Notice when you're feeling it. Whatever those signs or symptoms are for you, start paying attention. And we're going to get into this more. But start paying attention to what your body is trying to tell you based on the symptoms, right? So awareness is step one. The earlier the better. Don't let yourself get too far. All right, so let's dive into the four different types of stress. And why this matters is because if you're trying to manage your stress, but you're using the wrong tool for the job, then you're spinning your wheels, right? I've been very passionate about having the right tool for the job. And if you're going to go the management route, and again, I want to talk about stress removal, but for so that we can recognize what is and what is not removal, we need to talk about stress management. And managing is valuable at times. It's what 99.99% of the population does. So keep in mind that what we're going to get into is different, but these are also very important. So the four types of stress, there's mental stress, physical stress, emotional stress, and spiritual stress. And I don't mean spiritual in like a religious standpoint, but spiritual from the gap between like who you are and who you want to be. The gap between your desire and your dreams versus like what you're actually how you're feeling day to day and like are you actually feeling that gap or not. So let's start with the first one, which is mental stress. I think a lot of us might understand what this is, but this is the overthinking, the noisy mind, the cognitive tax, the always being on, right? The noise that won't turn off. When you leave the office, you're still thinking about the email, you're still thinking about the deal, you're still thinking about the client. This is where a lot of attention is given to this mental stress layer. And if you want to manage your mental stress, there's so many coaches out there and cognitive work that you can do that tries to solve this problem at the mental. They're not necessarily levels, but they're kind of our levels actually. So at the mental level, there's so many people trying to offer you their services. Business coaches fall under this. Mindset coaches fall under this. time management basically falls under this. I know a coach who's very good at this cognitive mental layer. He's an elite performance coach. If any of you are looking for this kind of elite mental stress coach, then I can definitely point you in his direction. The second type of stress is physical stress. These are the health issues. These are the dis-ease that happens in your body. This is the body starting to break down. This is like what they tell you here is what I meant to say. Um, to handle physical stress, they might give you tools at the physical level, if that makes sense. So, like movement, dance, exercise, yoga, right? All of that stuff is like, let's use the kind of physical tools to manage the physical stress, right? If you're trying to tackle mental stress, usually they'll use mental tools. If you want to tackle physical stress, typically they'll give you physical tools like yoga, go for a run, go blow off steam, right? Something like that. Personally, if I had to suggest anything here, it would be calisthenics. It would be full body, not weight training, but body weight training, strength training. Throw some cardio in there too, for sure. Hit the sauna. I love hitting the sauna and the cold plunge. They are so, so good for you, right? Using something that can actually demand physical presence and physical exertion from you. So many guys will hit this one so hard at the gym and weightlift. And they're going to be bodybuilders. They're going to be pumping as much iron as they can, trying to hit their PRs and trying to max out at the gym as much as they can, because this is where they're spending their focus for handling their stress. They handle it physically. And of course, there is a little bit of crossover, right? Between does the physical management help with the mental stress? Yes, there's of course some crossover. All of these are connected and related. So let's get into the next type of stress, which is emotional. And what is emotional stress? Emotional stress is showing up reactively. It is the kind of like more sensory aspect of anxiety, because anxiety is both a mental and an emotional kind of thing, right? So there's the emotional side of anxiety. There's showing up reactive, short tempered, and maybe lashing out at our partners or our teams or our family or our employees or our peers or whoever, instead of actually being present and hearing what they're saying, listening to what they're saying, and then taking the time to calculate and process and respond. I think we all agree that a lot of people, or the main tool out here in the emotional world is therapy, right? If you want to manage your emotional stress, besides just like talking to your wife or your partner or your spouse, or just grabbing a beer with the guys, which alcohol really numbs you out. It doesn't process this stuff. It's not managing anything. It's numbing. But therapy is like the flagship tool for the emotional stress layer. Go talk to someone, go vent and let it out. So, if you want to go down this path and do stress management for your emotional stress, I find betterhelp.com makes stress very accessible, very easy. You kind of get what you pay for, but it's a good way to just have a regular routine, super easy video or text kind of approach to managing your emotional stress. So let's talk about the last one, spiritual stress. We kind of talked about this briefly in the beginning. Basically, this is the gap between who you are and who you think you should be, who you are and who you believe you're meant to be or what you were made for. This is you already achieved the dream, but you're still not at peace because something is just there that's not quite feeding it. And the kind of conventional tool or set of tools in the spiritual stress realm is things like meditation or any kind of practice that brings you and kind of disconnects you from what you were or what you are or your day to day and has you kind of focus more internally on something. So, my second tip for this presentation is like you want to recognize what type of stress you're dealing with. And then if you're going to go the management route, use the right tool for the job, right? Understand where you are, what kind of stress you're kind of working with here, And if you want to go with management, then use physical exertion if it really is like this kind of physical stress that's kind of going on. Or rest. That's another one, right? If your body is taxed, rest and doing nothing, right, is a physical management tool you can use. We don't like doing nothing all the time. Do we also like sleep? Sleep is a huge one, guys. If we're not sleeping, like we've got to be sleeping better. And diet, right? Diet, sleep, exercise, all the basic stuff we should be doing when it comes to managing our physical stress. So those are the tips for like managing your stress, right? I'm sure we've all heard the same things. Here's the thing, guys. These are all valuable at the right time. They're all valuable depending on what your goals are, but none of them fully address stress at the root level. And so this is where things get interesting. And this is how my philosophy is quite different from pretty much everything else that's out there. So there's a fifth kind of stress I want to talk about. And this fifth kind of stress is actually underneath all of the other four. And this is, for lack of a better word, it's biological stress. This is survival stress. And so here's the thing: stress is not the event that you experience. It's not the boss. It's not the job. It's not the decision. It's not the career. It's not the identity. Stress is what happens within the body. It's what the body carries because of the event, because of the thinking, because of the disconnection with who we are. So, survival stress is something that we think, oh, I mean, we're not worried about survival. We've got plenty of money in the bank, plenty of food on the table. Our lives are not at stake. And that's true. But that was survival back in the day. Modern survival is societal survival. What's your status? What's your income? What's your reputation? What are people saying about you? It triggers, it might look different, but it triggers the same biological mechanisms and has the same life or death kind of feeling at the brain, at the animal level. The same adrenaline, the same cortisol, the same energy that floods the body. And so here's where things get interesting. If you look at animals in the wild, when they experience a stressful event, a couple of things happen. They experience a stressful event usually when there's a threat and a threat to their survival. Not always, though, does the predator eat the prey, so the prey can faint, and all of that energy just gets absorbed back into the body. But it doesn't get absorbed back where it came from to be used later. It gets absorbed into like the soft tissue, kind of like a rag soaking up like some toxic liquid sludge. And so that's where all the stress is held. And if the animal wakes up and safely like gets up and walks away, it does something before it gets up and walks away. And what it does is it shakes and it trembles and it physically discharges that stress. That biological survival stress, that stress energy, it physically uses it in a vibratory kind of way and discharges it before it just gets up and walks away. And here's the crazy thing: if the animal does not shake that off, if it doesn't discharge that stress before it just gets up and gallops off into the sunset, it's going to die. And it dies because of something called capture myopathy. And if you look up what capture myopathy is, it basically, myopathy means like disease of the myo, of the muscle. It stops its heart. It's basically a heart attack. It's heart disease. In America, the number one cause of death is heart disease. And what do you think the number one cause of heart disease is? Stress. Yeah. So managing stress, it's not an option if you want to perform at your peak. Managing stress is not the goal. It should not be what we're after if we want to be the best versions of ourselves, because all we're doing is keeping ourselves plateauing. When in reality, we should be removing the stress that's in the way so that we can be the best version of ourselves. And so here's why this matters. This matters because we're human. And so, why do humans not discharge stress the way animals do? It's because of what makes us human. It's because of our prefrontal cortex. It's because of the thinking brain that we have. And so, instead of shaking or discharging the stress, it our brain kind of processes it different and we think about it and it gets processed in that area of the brain, which causes worry and rumination and noisy thoughts because we have language. And so all of that kind of survival energy comes up and gets processed with language. And that is rumination and worry and thinking and overthinking and noisy minds. That's the noise that doesn't turn off at night. That's the worry that is still running even after you've left the office. Even months or years after the event that was stressful, it's still running in the background. And this happens because as humans, the stress comes in just as easily, but it doesn't leave just as easily. So think about the last time you celebrated a real win, a huge win, whatever you celebrated, whether it was a deal or a partnership or an acquisition or your birthday or your fiance's birthday, your spouse's birthday, whatever, right? How long did that feeling actually last? Was it a day? Was it 2 days? Maybe a week? Was it just a few hours? Now think about the last time that something like deeply upset you, a deal didn't fall through that you were counting on, some type of betrayal, and how long did that feeling last? I bet you that feeling lasted significantly longer than the positive feeling. Because the way the human brain is wired, we hold on to the negative, we hold on to the stress, and it outlasts the positive. And this isn't weakness, guys. This isn't like, oh, it shouldn't be this way. This is biology. This is the way that brains are wired. Think about my friend with the Lamborghinis again. He held on to all of the stress for so long, and he couldn't let it go in a way that kept him from going to the ER. That's not a sufficient strategy. Managing your stress is surface level. Managing your stress is band aids. Managing your stress does not affect the root, which is basically like the nervous system. And this is a completely different kind of work that is required, but it's actually quite simple once you understand what's going on here. So let's talk about what actually works and some of these practical tools. The missing piece about stress and survival stress and human stress, we can call it, right, is the opposite of what I talked about before. The reason why we have the stress is because of our prefrontal cortex and because we think so much. So we need to do the opposite of that, which is tapping into the body and building this connection with our body again. We used to have it, especially when we were kids. If you look at kids, they're not overthinking anything. They're just doing their thing, having a great time, right? They're connected with their bodies. Most of us have lost that along the way. So we want to reconnect the mind body connection. That's the first step about rebuilding the ability to sense our own stress. Now, look, before you ask, we're not going to start shaking and trembling and doing that to let go of stress. I know people that do. I do know people that do. It is an option. But that's not what I'm advocating for here today. I just want to make sure you guys understand where this is coming from. So as you build the mind body connection, you can actively sense and start to release what your body has been holding at this deeper level, this biological survival level, because a lot of times what we've been holding on to it for decades. And this works below the level of the cognition, below the level of the physical stress management, below the level of the emotional, below the level of the spiritual layers, below the level of talk therapy and all these other management tools that are out there. This is not something you need to manage. This is what I do and what I teach is a tool that you can use anytime, anywhere. And the first step to be able to enter that world is the third tip for today, which is start building the mind body connection. This is the place to start. I want you to learn to feel what your body's feeling. And most of us have never been taught how. So if you guys are up for it, I'd like to lead us in a couple quick exercises just to start getting you guys feeling what's going on here and how this is like a little bit different than all the other management tools that's out there. Is that cool? All right, sweet. All right, so the first thing is if you want, you can turn your cameras off, but we're not going to be doing anything crazy or embarrassing or anything like that. We're going to be staying seated. And the first thing I want to ask you to do is just take a breath and close your eyes. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to tense every single muscle in our body as much as we can. From our toes to our nose, all the way from your feet to your legs, to your hips, to your abs, to your back, to your chest, to your shoulders, to your hands and your arms and your face and your neck and everything. You just want to completely scrunch, okay? We're going to do that. We're going to do this in just a moment. So we're going to do that. And then we're going to completely relax. So we're going to go from 100% tension to 100% relaxation. Okay, ready? Let's give it a shot. Tense everything: toes, nose, abs, shoulders, face, hands. Squeeze and then let go. And let go 100% and start to sense what this feels like. Start to notice what relaxation feels like. And now do two more at your own pace. Go ahead and tense everything up and relax. And just feel the difference. I know there's still some stimulation because we're on a call and you might be thinking, well, what's this person thinking or that person thinking? And, this would be very different if you were kind of just doing this on your own. But that's okay. We're just on a call here. One more time, tense everything up and let it all go. And just start to sense and feel. Where did you feel the tension? What does the relaxation feel like? Can you feel more space within your own body? Can you feel more flow within your own body? Can you feel more expansiveness? And then go ahead and open your eyes whenever you're ready. And now I'm going to ask you to sit up straight. And normally I would do this next exercise. I would encourage you, teach you guys to do this for 5 minutes. For the sake of time, we're only going to go for about a minute. But the goal now is to sit completely still. So go ahead and take a deep breath in, close your eyes, and go ahead and don't move a muscle. Don't scratch an itch. Don't adjust yourself in your seat. Try not to swallow. And just sit entirely still for a whole minute. And if your brain runs, that's fine. Let the thoughts run. We're not trying to quiet those down. All we're trying to do now is not move. Try not to sway, trying to adjust yourself. Just sit here completely still and see what it feels like. Is your body restless? Does part of you want to move? All right, go ahead and take another deep breath and then just open your eyes. So when you go home or after this call later on today, try that for 5 minutes. Even now, I can already feel the difference in myself, right? And these are the first steps of my MindWorks process, which it's not meditation, but you can see how it's similar, but it's a more active process. So even that small shift starts to bring you back into your body rather than just being in your mind all the time and using all of that energy in a thinking way. Because the opposite of thinking is feeling. And we want to feel and build and reconnect the mind body connection so that we can get out of the survival mode that we've been in for so long. So That's what I wanted to share with you guys today, right? Managing stress is valuable, and there's a lot of tools there. I've got a whole list of things that I can share with you, which I'll drop here in the chat or something. So if that's valuable for you when it's working, great, keep going. And please start looking at this other layer. Start trying to build the somatic connection, the mind body connection with these more somatic type exercises, because so many people never reach this. And this is why there's so many problems in society today. I think this is the game changer, right? So many people, like no one, so few people do this work, but those who do, it changes the game. It really changes the game. And they say that the most dangerous kind of stress is the one that you've learned to live with because you stop noticing it, right? It's like if you ask a fish what water is, the fish is not going to know what water is because it's in it all the time, swimming, right? It's surrounded. The same thing with stress because it's in our bodies, because it's absorbed within us at this super low level below all the other types. We simply don't recognize that it's there. We think it's just who we are and we think it's just a part of us. But it's not true. So you've been accumulating, your stress bucket has been filling over time in all these different layers. And what I was talking about today gets into this lower biological survival layer. And I want you to really think through all the things you've tried in the past. Did they help? Did they manage? Or did they actually release some of your stress bucket? And how much more could you do? How much more could you earn? How much more could you produce? But more importantly, how much more could you show up to your families? How much more love could you give? How much more presence could you give to those people you care about most if you started to actually let go of what you've been carrying? So happy to go deeper into any of this on the questions and answers on the Q&A. Um, if any of it, if any of it lands for you, like in a way, like please share whatever came up for you, or I'll give my info here and we can definitely chat. But that's all I had for you today, guys. I hope that helps. Thank you so much, and appreciate the opportunity for coming on.